Now, Dr. Craig turns to the second point about justice, and he thinks that there's a problem here in Islam, but not in Christianity. And he says that if God were to extend mercy to a person, then God would not be extending justice. Is that really true? Let's think about the judge looking at the parking or the speeding ticket for a moment. When the judge issues a judgment and says, okay, I want to be merciful to you. Okay, you are forgiven. Isn't that a just judgment? When the judge listens to the case and decides what judgment to give, do we say that he has been unjust on that occasion? Now, I must clarify. There is a situation in which one person has harmed another person. In Islamic theology, it is understood that God is not going to forgive that harm until that person repays it himself, or unless God himself gives a compensation to the wronged individual. So if I steal your money, it is no sense of me asking God, please forgive me. God wants me to return that money to you and then ask him for forgiveness, and he will forgive me. So forgiveness here has to be sought both ways. But if it so happens that there is no way in God's world that I could return that money to you, then God could compensate you for your loss and still forgive me, and his treasures would not be diminished, and his mercy would not be sacrificed, neither his justice. In fact, his mercy would be extended to all human beings. So I do not see this problem between justice and mercy here in the Islamic concept. But in the Christian concept, I do see a difficulty. I had asked, does God love his son? And Dr. Craig said yes. But I also asked, does God love his son as much as he loves the world? This is the whole point of that. And if he loved the world enough to want to spare the world, did he not love his son enough to want to spare his son? And couldn't there have been another way that God could just simply forgive human beings? Wasn't that within his power to do it, just to forgive human beings and let his son also go? Or if his son decided to take the sin upon himself, couldn't God have said, son, I really love what you want to do for these people, and I want to do for them that very thing more than you want to do it for them. As much as you want the people to be forgiven, I also want the same. Let them go, and you be free. You see, God did not have to kill his son. And this idea, we must explore where it came from. I had asked, should we love the Father? Not just that. Could we love the Father as much as we love the Son? I think this is what Dr. Craig has not actually answered. Because certainly we must love the Son more, is what some Christian theologians have said. And how could this be? Now, Dr. Craig tells us this was God's eternal plan. And it is difficult to conceive that this could have been God's eternal plan. In fact, if we read the Bible, we see the opposite. When God created human beings, in Genesis chapter 1, the chapter ends by saying that God saw that everything he created was good. So how did it come about that human beings would need this sacrifice to save them? Notice that I had not said that Paul originated this belief. I had said that this belief among Christians owes a lot to the preachings and teachings of Paul. There is a difference, because there could have been other teachers along with Paul in that social, cultural milieu in the Greco-Roman world who would have similar ideas, and these ideas eventually remained in Christianity. To show that it is not Paul alone who taught these things, Dr. Craig cited the book of Hebrews. But we do not know who wrote the book of Hebrews, and for a long time it was thought that the book of Hebrews was actually written by Paul. Why? Because the ideas in the book of Hebrews is in fact so similar to the ideas in the Pauline letters. But in fact, if we go back to the teachings of Jesus that we can find, let's say in the Gospel according to Luke, his story about the prodigal son, what does that story tell us? That story actually tells us that if anyone turns back repentant to God, God is willing to forgive him, just like a son turns back to his father, and the father extends full forgiveness for him. Nobody has to pay for his sins. Mark chapter 14 speaks about the blood and so on. But in fact, many scholars think that although Jesus shared a meal with his disciples, that was a common Seder meal that still survives in Judaism. It did not have anything to do with a sacrificial death. And this Eucharist that was instituted then, or said to be instituted then, owes something again to the teachings of Paul, who said in 1 Corinthians that on the night Jesus was betrayed, this is what he did. Remember, the Gospels were written after Pauline teachings were already widespread, and the Gospels that we have were collected by people who were influenced by Pauline teaching. Now, what about salvation? That is easily attainable, as I've already explained. So I do not see any difficulty with the Islamic concepts, but much with the Christian concept.